José Youngs here with FanSided MMA and Sports Illustrated MMA, flanked by three Canadians here at the scene of UFC 226 in Las Vegas. Guys, we just saw a lot of history on this card, but before we get to the main card, I'll start with you, Nick. Biggest story from the prelims?
Dan Hooker just getting better and better after continuing at his run in lightweight. I'm a guy who hates weight cutting. I'll just put that out there. And so when guys move up in weight classes, I find it impressive and it's good for the sport.
James, same question to you. You've interviewed a lot of these guys, especially on the undercard. What stood out to you the most?
I think Jakar Close stood out on the card. Dan Hooker definitely had an impressive performance, but Jakar, a guy that has improved his record in the lightweight division and taking out a tough guy in Lando Venata, I thought he really made a statement tonight.
And Danny, you were pretty critical of the tough finale last night. Not so much that the fights weren't good, but it went long, and it felt like we were just waiting to get to tonight. What did you take away from the undercard prelim? Which fight stood out to you the most?
I think the reason why I was critical of last night is because I know we can have nights like tonight where almost every fight is great. From the prelims, my thing was Gokhan Saki is just not, the elite guy we maybe thought he was. I still think he's an incredible fighter, but we're seeing, just being a great kickboxer doesn't translate into being a great MMA striker. So for me, that was a guy I kind of expected to be seeing a lot of in the next 2 to 3 years, and he's got some work to do, I think.
And I'll stick with you, Danny. You've talked a lot about this individual. Mike Perry came out on top against Paul Felder. What was your impression of his victory from a guy who has come out guns blazing, was much more subdued in there, and even acted after the fight very un-Mike Perry-esque?
Yeah, outside of my personal opinions on some of what he's done and said outside of the octagon, you're right. He showed improvement. He showed he was fighting a guy who was smaller. Let's acknowledge that, and I think he bullied him a little bit in that regard. But yeah, I was really impressed with the performance, and there's a reason people are hyped on Mike Perry, and he does bring a level of excitement and a style that's really exciting. And yes, it was more subdued, but it was still there. He's still a lunatic, and I had a lot of fun with that fight, and that's maybe the first time I've been able to say that about Mike Perry, just because I dislike him so much a lot of the time.
And I don't know if you guys saw when Paul Felder walked out to shipping up to Boston, Mike Perry was doing an Irish jig and punching himself in the face. All right, we'll go to you, James. We'll jump to the Anthony Pettis-Michael Chiesa fight. Michael Chiesa missed weight. There was a lot of bad blood between these guys, surprising amount of bad blood coming into this fight. What did you think of Michael Chiesa's performance, and where does Anthony Pettis go from here after submitting a black belt like Michael Chiesa? Another black belt.
Well, I was going to say disappointing is the best way to describe Michael Chiesa. He was the favorite heading into this fight. He had the incident with 223, not getting to fight on that card, either to Pettis, but it's been a while since we had seen Chiesa in the cage, and he got submitted. That never looks good on the resume. But Anthony Pettis, we got to talk about the fact that this guy looked like he did when he was a UFC champion. He had a lot of swagger, a lot of confidence, and he gets a finish. That was the big thing here. I remember being here last year, Anthony Pettis getting the win over Jim Miller, decision. That was great and everything, but to get a finish over a guy like Chiesa, who's still pretty highly regarded in that division, I thought really sort of shut a lot of critics up that said he was done or past his prime.
And Nick, we'll jump to you on a fight before that. Dana was very high on Paulo Costa and Uriah Hall's performance. He said that Uriah Hall was the fighter he expected coming out of the Tough House. Even though he lost, this is the most praise we've heard Dana give Uriah Hall. And he didn't even win. What did you make of both of their performances?
Well, just on Dana's comments, first off, I was kind of surprised to hear him talk about Uriah Hall that way. A losing fighter, sometimes, he didn't have to say anything. So I guess that's good for Dana, good promotion. But, Paulo Costa looked like an animal out there. He looked like a guy that really can make some waves in the middleweight division. A lot of people, figured this is probably going to be his toughest test because he did fight a former UFC champion in Johnny Hendricks, but let's be honest, that's not the guy who arguably beat arguably the GOAT, GSP, back in 2013. So, how much does that mean? Not tons, and, performances before that, not the most meaningful. This one, Uriah Hall does have his up and downs, but, Hall looked good and Costa just looked better. I think this guy really will do well at 185.
And Danny, I'll jump to you. I want to get your take on this specifically because you and I sat next to each other, cage side. That co-main event, a lot of people said this isn't going to last 30 seconds. It lasted, not only did it last 15 minutes, they're saying it's the worst, most boring fight in the history of the UFC.
15 excruciating minutes of hot garbage. I asked you if I was allowed to swear before we started. That was so crap. And they're arguably two of my favorite fighters in the entire UFC. And the fans, I'm often critical. I think they boo too early. Boo. Do the wave. use your cell phones. That type of performance, Derek Lewis at least was, very contrite, I think is the word. He felt awful about it and good. That was garbage. That is not what fans paid to get in the arena to see, and it is a product that is becoming of a professional sports organization, and everyone involved should be ashamed.
And James, what did you make of Derek's comments afterward? He thinks even though he won, this set him back 2 fights. Dana didn't agree, but Derek Lewis is to say he's his biggest critic is an understatement. He was very upset with his performance. What did you make of those comments?
I thought they were honest. That's what you need to do. You can't BS the fans. I mean, he heard the boos. He knew the performance wasn't great. I like the fact that he was honest about this. Oftentimes we have fighters up there trying to sell us on something that is BS, and he knew he had a bad performance, whether it was the back, whether it was Ngannou not willing to engage. I think there's a lot of negative things to take away from that fight, but I think in some ways he won the fans over, and the press are just, for him acknowledging his mistakes and, vowing to get better in his next fight.
You got something to add, Danny?
He didn't win me over with that. You still wasted 15 minutes of my life.
Well, would you rather he lie about it, though? Let's be honest.
No, I agree. I'm just saying he didn't win me over. I agree with everything you said. He just didn't win me over. Because, honestly, I'm not going to say anything more.
All right, we'll move on to the main event. We'll start with you, Nick. This is your first UFC event you've ever covered. A very historic. Before we get into the shenanigans after the fight, what did you make of Daniel Cormier not only winning the heavyweight championship, but knocking out Stipe in 1 round?
I was surprised. I picked Stipe Miocic going in to defend the title. I thought his height advantage, reach advantage, just physicality in general, I thought he was the bigger guy, and I thought he'd be able to, I didn't think he'd take DC down. If DC was going to win, that's how I thought he would win with wrestling. So I was surprised just that Cormier won, and then the fact that he knocked him out in the first round just made it even a bigger shock. And I mean, I feels, it feels great, for DC. I think. I mean, the guy is firstly a great human being, but also what he's gone through, the Jones losses, and something he said at the press conference just a few moments ago, that people can call the 205 belt, the fake belt if they want, but there's no taking away the heavyweight title. He beat the rightful champion in Stipe, and he did so in quick fashion. Just a surprising performance, and a terrific one.
And James, correct me if I'm wrong, you also picked Stipe to win?
I did, yeah.
What did you make of his performance, and what do you make of now we have a new heavyweight champion who broke the longest reigning champion ever?
That's what they call a double barrel question. The first part of that is the fact that I thought Stipe was looking good up until the knockout. He was getting his shots in. He was getting hit a little bit as well too, but DC caught him. I mean, it happens. It's heavyweight MMA. Looking at this fight, just with it being a heavyweight fight, for him to get caught, it's not entirely surprising. Although I will say, if you were to pick how DC would win this fight, people felt like it would be the wrestling, and it wasn't that sort of got it done. It was the striking. So Stipe gets knocked out. Whether him becoming a first-time father, played a factor in this. Maybe a lot in his mind heading in this fight. We'll never know. But at the very least, you got to give all the credit in the world to Daniel Cormier. And this is a great situation for the UFC. Can you imagine if Stipe Miocic won tonight and had to fight Brock Lesnar? And just there wouldn't be as much anticipation as there is right now for DC fighting him, because DC gets it as far as the personality aspect of it. So I think for the UFC and for Daniel Cormier, this is just a great scenario that played out tonight.
I think this is a perfect segue. I want to get Danny's comments on this. What did you make of Brock Lesnar storming the octagon, shoving Daniel Cormier, throwing the entire heavyweight division under the bus? Because that fight is happening next. That much is certain. What did you make of the spectacle?
I'm not a wrestling guy. This is something that that you are, and I'm not. I thought it was super dumb, but I'm also like a guy who used to just ride his bike into fences just to see what would happen. I like dumb stuff sometimes, and I thought it was dumb. It's not the way I want to sell the sport, but I understand why it works. I think it's ultimately going to be great, and if it gets DC a whole load of money, I live in Alberta, so whatever money Brock makes, he'll bring back into Western Canada, invest in our fine social institutions, so that's good. Look, heavyweight should be the biggest, most popular weight division in the entire combat sports, whether it's the UFC or otherwise, and this brings attention that hasn't been brought to it in years. So, look, it's dumb. I don't like it, but dumb's not always bad.
And we're running along. I'll end on this. I am surrounded by 3 Canadians. Dana's very excited about the Calgary card coming up. I really want to get all three of your opinions on this. Nick, we'll start with you. What can fans expect from a Canadian crowd, and how excited are you about the Calgary finally getting the card they quote-unquote deserve?
Well, firstly, the Canadian crowd's going to be terrific. I've never been to Calgary myself, but just considering the fact that, as Dana White has said, ever since the card happened, it sucked. They're going, they've wanted a card for a very long time. They're finally getting one, and it's a damn good card, too. Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier, the rematch we've waited for the past year or so. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, her first non-title fight in a long time. The co-main event, right now I can't even remember what it is. Jose Aldo and Jeremy Stephens, a terrific featherweight fight. It can't get much better than that on free TV.
James, same question to you. You're pretty well entrenched in the Canadian MMA scene. How excited are you that this card is coming to Calgary? Because Dana, he said UFC 149, I believe, did not deliver. That's an understatement. He said it's one of the worst cards ever. He's really bringing the stacked free card to Calgary.
Yeah, I mean, this could really be a pay-per-view with how stacked this card is, and I'm glad Dana acknowledged that, the Calgary fans have been, wanting a card like this, because Danny can attest to this. The one question we always get all the time, when are they going to Calgary? When are they going back? And now they finally are. They're going with a really spectacular card. And one thing I want to point out, too, for those who don't know, in Canada, Alberta is one of the few provinces that consistently puts on shows on the regional MMA scene. So people expecting a good crowd for this one, I think they're absolutely going to deliver, because fans are starving for some MMA, and they got a really good card to have a UFC event at.
And lately, I'll stick with you before I jump to Danny. They had the UFC, I believe, 206 was Max Anthony. They had the Gustafsson John Jones fight card. They obviously had that big Jake Shields GSP. Is this going to be up there? Does this fight card, obviously every fight card has that possibility to live up to the hype. Is this the next great Canadian card at the end of the day?
It should, but I mean, the problem with this card, unfortunately, is that, for a hardcore fan, this is amazing, but for the casual fan, does that live up to a GSP and Shields? Not exactly as far as name value and stuff, but I think it's a solid card. It should do pretty well. I think you're going to see people really come out and be receptive to the card, but is it on that level of George St. Pierre at, in the Rogers Centre or Skydome? It's tough to say. I don't think so.
And Danny, I'll end with you. You're based in Calgary. You know this card front and back. You've broke a lot of the fights. What are you expecting when the UFC Octagon finally touches down in Calgary?
I mean, the thing to understand about Calgary is this isn't Toronto. We're not walking around in suits. This isn't Vancouver. We're not doing yoga and eating sushi. This is Alberta. We got an inexplicably socialist government. We got mud on our boots. We took the stuff that's good for your teeth out of our water, and we ride dirty. This is going to be the wildest Canadian card. People are going to lose their damn minds in Alberta. This is the Stampede City. This is going to be off the hook. The card is incredible. Do I think it's GSP Shields? No, it's not the big names, but this is an Alberta card. We do things different out west. It's something else entirely. Get the rest of the country out of my face.
And we'll close on that. This has been José Youngs with Nick Baldwin, James Lynch, Danny Austin, Sports Illustrated MMA, and FanSided MMA. These three will be in Calgary most likely. I won't, but they'll still be pumping out all kinds of content, so follow all of them. And until then, I'll see you in LA.